Welcome to this APC mock interview, where today we'll look at some questions on the anticipated hot topics for 2025. This will include coverage on key updates including the RICS Harris debate, focusing on the impact of artificial intelligence on the profession, the RICS 2025 business plan, the impact of UK and US election results on the industry, and much more. During the interview, we're going to look at each question in depth and explain some of the answers you can give, and I really hope this helps improve your understanding of the anticipated hot topics for 2025. The first area we'll take a look at is the impact of artificial intelligence on the industry, and a question we may receive on this area is, can you please explain your understanding of the RICS Harris debate? And to address this, candidates can advise that the Harris debate is organised annually by the RICS and provides a platform to address ethical concerns in the field of surveying and valuation. The debate honours Jonathan Harris, a former RICS president known for his contributions to professional development and education. A follow-on question we may receive is, can you explain what was discussed during the Harris debate in 2024? And to address this, candidates can advise that the debate focused on the theme of ethics in the age of artificial intelligence and its impact on valuation practices. The debate explored the ethical implications of incorporating artificial intelligence into valuation and surveying as AI becomes more integrated in these fields. Another question we may receive on this area is, can you please explain your view on the use of AI for the purposes of property valuation? And to address this will be largely dependent on the candidate's own views. However, a particular viewpoint may be that artificial intelligence does have the potential to offer greater accuracy and efficiency when carrying out a valuation. AI algorithms are able to evaluate other comparable properties and pinpoint an estimated valuation, and applications currently exist that take into account factors such as satellite imagery, crime rates, market trends, and regional economic factors. However, current drawbacks of AI are that site-specific abnormals such as property condition and special values cannot always be considered. There is also a susceptibility to a reliance on bad data, which can reduce the accuracy of the AI-generated inputs. AI can offer advantages with providing access to a wide array of data and greater efficiencies when used as a data collection and processing tool. However, in its current stage of development and into the future, it may always be critical to have significant input from a human appraiser standpoint in order to undergo rigorous checks and due diligence. A follow-on question we may receive on this area is, can you please explain the ethical concerns regarding the adoption of AI for the purposes of valuation? And to address this, candidates may advise that it's important to consider that AI algorithms do rely heavily on data, and if this data is inaccurate, incomplete, or intentionally weighted following biased data input, then this can dramatically skew results in the favour or to the detriment of the parties involved. There are also great issues around transparency of the data input and analysis, with operators of AI not always fully cognizant of how results have been generated. In order for a valuation to be compliant with RICS valuation standards, transparency of how the value has been determined is key. And there is a perception that AI models are often regarded as closed boxes, where even creators can't fully explain how decisions have been made. Therefore, to run a valuation with sole AI input is not currently compliant with current regulations and industry standards. Look, if you're finding this video useful so far and you're serious about passing your APC, we've put together a question and answers revision guidebook, and this will save countless hours compiling revision notes and contains over 1,000 questions and answers based on real-life APC interviews. It also contains example submission documents and explained step-by-step how to complete the APC. Along with the step-by-step guide, there is also a free APC diary template, along with revision mind maps on the RICS hot topics to support your revision. The study guide has helped around 90% of my colleagues pass their APC first time, and I really hope you find this a useful resource when preparing for your APC. Grab it now using the link in the description below. A follow-on question we may receive is, what impact will artificial intelligence have on the construction industry? And again, this is very dependent on the candidate's own views on the adoption of AI. However, as a starting point, candidates may suggest that a large overhead for the majority of main contractors is the estimating process, which can be very onerous and require weeks of input from skilled estimators. Artificial intelligence can assist the estimating process by supporting estimators with both data collection and processing when reviewing large tender packs made up of contract documents, drawings, specifications, and legal documentation. Site safety AI-powered cameras can also scan construction sites to detect potential safety hazards. For example, if a worker forgets to wear their helmet, an alert can be generated to advise the site management to intervene. AI-driven sensors can also be placed on site plant and machinery to predict when maintenance inspections and replacements should be undertaken. Plant and machinery downtime can cause significant costs and delays, which AI can play a significant part in reducing. AI technology can also use energy modelling software to adjust lighting, HVAC and security systems in order to reduce operating costs and improve energy efficiency. The automation of construction tasks can also be achieved for repetitive and labour-intensive tasks such as bricklaying, excavation, demolition and welding. We'll now take a look at some questions regarding the economic factors that can have an impact on the construction and property industries. The first question we'll take a look at on this area is what impact will the UK Labour government's election have on the property and construction industries? And to address this, candidates may advise regarding house building targets. The Labour government has pledged to build 1.5 million homes over the next parliamentary term, and they have reinstated mandatory housing targets and updating the National Planning Policy Framework in order to achieve this. There has also been a promise of significant investment within infrastructure projects, with significant funding planned for public infrastructure, including transportation networks, renewable energy projects and urban development. This will create opportunities for large-scale construction projects and is likely to drive economic growth and job creation. There is also a huge focus on sustainability, with the Labour government committing to embedding green practices across the industry, with policies focusing on eco-friendly materials, retrofitting of existing buildings for energy efficiency, and integrating biodiversity within urban planning. This could lead to a significant increase in demand for sustainable construction practices through regulations such as the minimum energy efficiency standards. Labour also plans to address the current construction sector skills shortage through youth training initiatives and improve working conditions, such as banning 0 hours contracts, and this could in turn create a more skilled and stable workforce, but will require significant investment in order to meet labour demands. And the next question we'll take a look at is what impact will the 2024 US election results have on the property and construction industries? And to address this, candidates can advise that there is likely to be impacts regarding currency fluctuations, as the value of the US dollar often fluctuates sharply during and after an election, and these shifts directly affect the exchange rate between the dollar and pound, which in turn impacts the attractiveness of UK property to overseas investors. A weaker pound against the dollar could mean heightened interest from the US and other international buyers, particularly in prime markets like London, driving higher property prices. There is also likely to be a large impact on interest rates, as the US election influences the Federal Reserve's economic policies, which in turn affects global financial markets, and changes in US monetary policy could lead to adjustments by the Bank of England, and for UK property, interest rates are crucial, as a rise in interest rates could dampen demand, making mortgages more expensive. However, conversely, if rates stay relatively low, the market could remain buoyant, with borrowing costs staying affordable for longer. The US election is also likely to have an impact on supply chain and construction, as changes in US trade policy or tariffs could have a ripple effect through the global economy, affecting the cost of materials such as steel and timber, which could in turn result in higher costs for builders and slow down the pace of new developments or push up prices in the UK marketplace. With the US having a world-leading tech sector, the election results could also encourage further growth in the sector, which could increase the demand for technology and remote working, and this in turn could bolster demand for homes in England's regional cities, which have become increasingly popular with remote workers seeking affordability and a better work-life balance. The next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain your economic outlook for the 2025 UK property market? And to address this, candidates could advise that the UK property market in 2024 has been dampened by high interest rates, which have aimed to combat rising inflation. The Bank of England looks set to maintain relatively high interest rates in comparison to previous low levels, which is still impacting buyer affordability. This increased cost of borrowing has also resulted in large-scale developments being postponed due to interest rate rises affecting their viability. For 2025, there is cautious optimism that further interest rate cuts may be achievable due to falling inflation, and this in turn should result in increased market confidence, with a backlog of postponed developments and transactions then taking place. The next question we'll take a look at is, what is your economic outlook for the 2025 UK construction sector? And to address this, candidates can advise that the UK construction industry has experienced a slowdown across 2024 due to rising material and labour costs, with high inflation and interest rates keeping prices high. Due to falling inflation and small interest rate cuts towards the back end of 2024, material prices such as steel, chipboard and plastic piping are now starting to soften, and these market shifts should result in material price reductions entering into 2025 and create increased affordability for developments that may have been postponed due to them being previously unviable. A further key challenge remains in that there is a persistent skills shortage ongoing, which has been exacerbated by Brexit's impact on labour supply. This shortage is pushing up costs, making it vital for the industry to invest in apprenticeships and training programmes. Environmental sustainability also remains a key priority for the Labour government, which should support a continued shift and preference for sustainable building methods and products. These are typically more expensive, which will see a trade-off between affordability and sustainability for larger scale developers. The next question we'll take a look at is, what impact is hybrid working and working from home having on the property sector? And to address this, candidates can advise that working from home is having a significant impact on both residential and commercial property. Many workers now prioritise homes that can accommodate home offices, which has led to increased demand for properties with extra space or adaptable layouts. And properties in suburban areas and rural areas are also increasing in demand due to flexibility of remote working. And due to these regions providing larger living spaces at lower costs, property values in these areas have risen. Within commercial real estate, remote working is also reshaping office space requirements, now downsizing their office footprints as hybrid work models become further entrenched. Long lease terms of 20 to 25 years on commercial properties are declining in popularity, with shorter term lease arrangements offering greater flexibility now being preferred. In the future, there may be a continued shift towards shorter term flexible office arrangements with adaptable office designs that support hot desking and open plan team collaboration areas. Due to increasing building regulations and environmental targets, offices in prime locations with sustainable credentials will remain in high demand. The next question we'll take a look at is, please explain your understanding of project bank accounts. And to address this, candidates can advise that a project bank account, or PBA, is a dedicated ring-fenced bank account used in construction projects to manage payments securely and transparently. They are designed to ensure that all parties involved in a project, including subcontractors, suppliers, and the main contractor, receive payments directly and promptly from the account, which minimises the risk of late or non-payment. A PBA is set up at the start of a construction project with agreements in place between the employer, main contractor, and participating subcontractors on how payments are made. The employer typically deposits funds into the PBA for work completed, with payments then made simultaneously to all parties listed within the PBA agreement. And this is based on pre-agreed terms which bypass the traditional hierarchical payment flows from client to main contractor down to supply chain level. The next question we'll take a look at is, what steps would you take in the event of a main contractor insolvency? And to address this, candidates could advise first of all that they would ensure that all contractual procedures relating to insolvency are followed, especially regarding termination rights and obligations. They would then need to make record on payments made, work progress, and materials on site. If the contractor's insolvency means that they can no longer fulfill their obligations, the contract should be terminated following the specified procedures. The site should be secured to prevent any damage or unauthorised access, providing that the contract permits this, and it may also be necessary to inform subcontractors in order to remove materials or to secure their assets. A chartered surveyor should prepare a detailed valuation statement reflecting the current state of the project, and this includes assessing completed works, retention sums, and any outstanding claims such as loss and expense. Engagement of alternative contractors may be required, and if a new contractor is appointed to complete the work, a new tender process or a novation of the original contract may take place. If the contract includes provision for step-in rights through collateral warranties, a lender or developer may then take over the project. We'll now take a look at some questions regarding sustainability, which remains a key area of focus for the RICS going into 2025. And the next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain your understanding of what happened at Conference of the Parties 29? And to address this, candidates can advise that COP29 was held in Baku, Azerbaijan in November 2024, and this focused on addressing the climate change finance gap through the Loss and Damage Fund designed to support vulnerable nations. Some progress was made on working towards a global carbon market, where the buying and selling of carbon emissions is facilitated to help reduce global emissions. And this market would incentivise global emissions for companies, countries, and other entities. By putting a price on carbon, it incentivises industries to innovate and invest in cleaner technologies and help to reduce the global carbon footprint. Progress was also made on the NCQG, or New Climate Financial Goal, and this was to replace the previous $100 billion goal, and this intended to ensure that sufficient financial resources are mobilised in order to support developing countries to address the impacts of loss and damage from climate-related disasters. A consensus on the amount and scope of funds required was discussed during COP29. A follow-on question we may receive on this area: can you please explain your understanding of the term global carbon market? And to address this, candidates can advise that this refers to an international system that allows for the buying and selling of carbon emissions, allowances, or credits. It is designed to help reduce global greenhouse gas emissions by putting a price on carbon to incentivise countries, companies, and other entities in order to innovate and invest in cleaner technologies and help to reduce the global carbon footprint. Another question we may receive is, can you please provide a high-level overview of the RICS Sustainability Report for 2024? And to address this, candidates can advise that the RICS Sustainability Report provided a detailed analysis of the current state of sustainability within the built environment sector. And the key findings included, first of all, the identification of an increased market demand for green buildings. However, the adoption of sustainable practices remains limited. High upfront costs and insufficient government incentives form significant barriers to widespread implementation of greener building methods. The report also highlighted a need for consistent sustainability measurement across projects, and tools like the RICS Whole Life Carbon Assessment does aim to address this issue by providing a unified framework for assessing and reducing carbon emissions throughout a building's life cycle. The RICS emphasises that the level of commitment and action needs to increase substantially in order to achieve 2050 net zero targets, and the RICS continues to play a pivotal role in shaping sustainability policies and standards globally. Its involvement in initiatives like the UN's Buildings Breakthrough highlights the importance of harmonising sustainability standards worldwide. The next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain your understanding of the minimum energy efficiency standards? And to address this, we can advise that the minimum energy efficiency standards are regulations in the UK that set out the minimum energy performance requirements for buildings, specifically for private rented properties. Under the regulations, properties in the private rented sector must meet at least an E rating on their energy performance certificate in order to be legally rented out. And if a building is rated lower than an E, landlords are required to improve the energy efficiency of the property unless specific exemptions apply. The regulations are part of the UK government's broader environmental and sustainability agenda, and they aim to ensure that properties are energy efficient and more environmentally friendly. The next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain your understanding of the RICS policies on diversity, equity and inclusion? And to address this, candidates can advise that diversity, equity and inclusion remains a huge priority of the RICS. This is because surveying and construction are typically industries that have lagged behind others when attracting and retaining talent from different backgrounds, with the industry remaining a white male-dominated profession. Within the RICS policy document, Diversity, Equity and Inclusion, the RICS sets out action plans for firms in order to support with attracting and retaining talent, regardless of their gender, socioeconomic, disability, race, age or religious backgrounds. This includes actions such as making offices accessible for all visiting personnel, ensuring speaking panels at events are diverse, consideration of where and how jobs are advertised, removing bias from the recruitment process, providing training for staff on policies and inclusive practices. The RICS rules of conduct also require RICS regulated firms and members to encourage diversity and inclusion, and there is also the RICS Inclusive Employee Quality Mark, which is promoted by the RICS. The next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain your understanding of the terms diversity, equity and inclusion, and explain why these are so important? To address this, candidates can advise that diversity refers to the makeup of who we are as humans and what makes us different. This can be in relation to our skin colour, socio-economic background, disabilities, education or religious beliefs. Organisations with a diverse workforce are proven to be more effective and are better placed to serve their communities, as they are more likely to understand the issues facing those communities. Equity is a recognition that all employees may not have been afforded the same opportunities, and looks to address any imbalances within a workforce by looking to provide equal opportunities for all. This can be done by ensuring each person has the right tools and support to fulfill their potential, regardless of their career starting point. And ensuring equity within the workforce is critical to attracting, retaining and developing talent within an organisation. And inclusion is a key part of an organisation's culture and aims to improve inclusivity of all personnel, regardless of their background. This can be crucial in allowing a workforce to feel supported, included and comfortable in order to be their true selves and perform at their best during the workplace. Are you aware of any guidance that applies to RICS members when using social media? To address this, candidates can firstly reference their knowledge of the RICS Guidance Note, Use of Social Media Guidance for Members version 1, and this guidance note first took effect from the 30th of June 2021. With the use of social media sometimes being complex and sensitive, candidates will be expected to have a knowledge of this guidance note, as this sets out the same standards as stipulated in the RICS Rules of Conduct and reminds members that these do not change whether communicating via social media, face-to-face or traditional forms of media. So it's definitely worth reading through a copy of the guidance note and familiarising yourself with its contents. A follow-on question we may receive is, how do you ensure you operate in line with the RICS guidance on the use of social media? And to address this, firstly, candidates could advise they are always sure to use social media in a responsible and professional manner, in the same way that they communicate via face-to-face or other written forms of communication. They can also advise that they are sure to use professional and respectful language when communicating and understand their responsibility in representing the RICS. Candidates and members of the RICS should never make a post on social media that is dishonest or would cause offence in any way, and members should realise that this could potentially undermine public confidence and trust in the profession. And staying with this subject, another question we may expect on this area would be, when would the RICS investigate a social media post made by one of its members? And to address this, candidates could advise that an investigation may take place if a social media post is discriminatory, dishonest, abusive or threatening, likely to cause significant harm, distress or offence to a person, shows a pattern of frequent or large number of concerning communications, and ignores previous advice or warnings about concerns. And with the recent introduction of the RICS Inclusive Employee Quality Mark, this is another area that may be a hot topic for candidates sitting their final assessment in 2024. A question we may anticipate on this area is, could you please explain your understanding of the RICS Inclusive Employee Quality Mark? And to address this, candidates can advise that the RICS is launching a scheme known as the Inclusive Employee Quality Mark. This is designed to improve diversity and inclusion within the property and construction sector, which is always typically lags behind other industries. The scheme requires employers to pledge their commitment to adopting and continually improving against the following 6 principles. These are leadership and vision, recruitment, staff development, staff retention, staff engagement, and continuous improvement. Participating firms will be required to assess their performance against these criteria on a biannual basis. The RICS will use the assessment information to document the outcomes and trends for the profession as a whole. And participating firms are able to use the branding signatory to the RICS Inclusive Employee Quality Mark. A follow-on question we may receive in this area is, what are the main benefits of diversity and inclusion? Candidates can advise that diverse inclusive environments help to attract skilled professionals from diverse backgrounds, They establish a sense of belonging among employees. It encourages employees to feel more connected, increases productivity, reduces staff turnover, and allows employees to feel valued and accepted. With there being a big push by the RICS to improve diversity and inclusion, another question we may receive regarding this area is what is the RICS doing to improve diversity and inclusion? And to address this, candidates can advise that the RICS has set up Diversity Inclusion Leadership, which is a knowledge hub allowing the RICS to share ideas on how and why diversity and inclusion is so important to the RICS. This has included initiatives including International Women's Day, celebrating the achievement of women in our profession, Pride 2022, with an equality pledge focusing on the importance of the LGBTQ+ representation in the profession, a Smith Review aiming to develop black and ethnic minority talent within the profession. Following the updated definitions of professional standards and practice information, this question again is another area that may be a hot topic for APC candidates. And that is, please explain your understanding of how the RICS define professional standards versus practice information. And to address this, candidates can advise that following the Birchard Review and its recommendations, the RICS have introduced two new definitions for professional guidance, which are now split into professional standards and practice information. These supersede the former definitions, including professional statements, guidance notes, and codes of practice. Professional standards set out requirements or expectations for RICS members and regulated firms with a focus on the baseline expectations for competence and ethical behaviour. They contain mandatory requirements that surveyors must follow where the word must is used, with best practice that surveyors should follow where the word should is used. And practice information sets out supporting guidance that advise surveyors in delivering specific services or working in specific areas of practice. The guidance is not mandatory and does not provide explicit recommendations. Therefore, practice information can refer to processes, toolkits, checklists, insights, research, and technical information or advice. Another question we may expect to see as a hot topic is, please explain your understanding of the guidelines around the use of the RICS logo. And to address this, candidates can advise that they are aware that the RICS guidelines are split into the rules of conduct for firms, use of the RICS logo and designation, and guidelines for personal use of the RICS logo. These guidelines contain detailed information regarding correct usage, which is approved by the Standards and Regulations Board. As a qualified RICS member, you have the right to use the logo for personal use, for example on business cards and personal email signatures. And there are specific rules around how the RICS master logo is presented. For example, the font and colour must not be adjusted, and there should be a minimum clearance around the logo equivalent to the size of the capital R within RICS. And here is a graphic to demonstrate the correct usage of the RICS logo.
What are the new RICS professional indemnity insurance requirements for 2022? To address this, we can say that the requirements for professional indemnity insurance were updated following issue of the UK Professional Indemnity Insurance Requirements version 9 with effect from the 1st of April 2022. The new requirements introduced a change to the maximum uninsured excess of professional indemnity insurance. This essentially means that for large companies with a turnover in excess of £10 million, there is no maximum limit of uninsured excess, whereas for companies with a turnover of less than £10 million, the maximum uninsured excess is the greater of £10,000 or 2.5% of the insured sum. And here we can see the new requirements in a table format. The next question we'll take a look at is what are the general requirements regarding professional indemnity insurance set by the RICS. And to address this, we can say that the policy cover must be made on each and every claims basis. This means that each claim is considered in its own right rather than in the aggregate. The RICS sets out the minimum levels of indemnity based on the company's turnover within the preceding year. The policy must be fully retroactive. This means that no matter when the claim took place, it's the policy that's actually in place at the time is the policy that will be called upon. The RICS sets out the maximum levels of uninsured excess as previously discussed. Run-off cover must be in place, and we must say that the policy should cover past and present employees, directors and partners. And from this table we can see the minimum levels of indemnity based on company turnover. For example, for companies with a turnover of £100,000 or less, The minimum level of indemnity cover required is £250,000. The next question we'll take a look at is what is the RICS Levitt Report? And to address this, we can say that the Levitt Report was commissioned by the RICS following a Treasury Management audit in 2018. Prior to the audit, the RICS had to extend its overdraft facility by around £3 million due to inaccurate cash flow forecasting. The Treasury Management audit offered a no assurance verdict on RICS internal financial control procedures, and following this, the Levitt Report was commissioned. The conclusion of the Levitt Report alluded to an internal power struggle due to its two-board structure made up of a management board and executive board. Following the report, the RICS accepted each of Levitt's recommendations, including that the RICS Government Council to have more oversight over internal dealings of the RICS. The RICS Governing Council are to be briefed by the Management Board as opposed to a single CEO. The RICS Governing Council are to oversee executive management bonuses, and the report called for greater transparency as the CEO could have involved the Management Board in order to rectify the Treasury issues. No evidence of improper or illegal conduct was discovered as a result of the Levitt Report. The next question we'll take a look at is what are the new rules of conduct, which we can note were updated in February 2022. And to address this, we can first of all reference rule number 1, where members and firms must be honest, act with integrity, and comply with their professional obligations, including obligations to the RICS. Rule number 2, where members and firms must maintain their professional competence and ensure that services are provided by competent individuals who have the necessary expertise. Rule number 3, where members and firms must provide good quality and diligent service. Rule number 4, where members and firms must treat others with respect and encourage diversity and inclusion. And rule number 5, where members and firms must act in the public interest, take responsibility for their actions, and act to prevent harm and maintain public confidence in the profession. We may receive a follow-on question on this area due to the rules of conduct having recently changed, and to address this we can say that the previous rules have been in place since 2007. Following research and consultation with RICS members, firms and members of the public, the majority voted in favour of replacing the existing rules of conduct and separate global professional and ethical standards. This was to provide a single document to enable greater clarity for RICS members and firms, and there is now a greater focus on clearer example behaviours, understanding evolving technology, and tackling climate change. We may receive a follow-on question asking us to talk through our understanding of the changes to the rules of conduct, and to address this, we can say that the Rules of Conduct October 2021 Global Practice Statement overhauled the previous separate documents, which were the Rules of Conduct for Members, Rules of Conduct for Firms, and the Global Professional and Ethical Standards. Appendix A of the Rules of Conduct now contains the professional obligations of members and firms. We may receive a follow-on question to this asking us to talk us through our understanding of the changes, and we can say that following the issue of the Rules of Conduct October 2021 Global Practice Statement, this document now overhauls the previous separate documentation, which were the Rules of Conduct for Members, the Rules of Conduct for Firms, and the Global Professional and Ethical Standards. So these three separate documents have now been overhauled in the 2021 Global Practice Statement, and Appendix A of this document now contains the professional obligations of members and firms. Candidates may also receive follow-on questions asking to explain an in-depth understanding of each of the rules of conduct. So the first question we'll take a look at on this area is please explain your understanding of rule number 1. And to address this, candidates could say that having reviewed the example behaviours, in adhering to rule number 1, members and firms should not allow themselves to be influenced improperly through the acceptance of work referrals, gifts or hospitality. Members and firms must also be sure to identify conflicts of interest and not provide services or advice where these conflicts of interest occur. This could be a scenario, for example, where you have reduced impartiality due to an existing relationship, for example being friends with a main contractor who has subsequently been selected to submit a tender would form a conflict of interest that would need to be reported. If asked to explain your understanding of rule number 2, candidates could reference that ensuring compliance with rule number 2, members and firms must only act for clients where they have the necessary knowledge, skills and resources to carry out the work competently. Firms must supervise any employees or subcontractors undertaking work on their behalf. For example, requesting that a junior surveyor undertakes a complex valuation due to resourcing issues would create problems in achieving compliance with this rule. Instead, an experienced and suitably qualified surveyor should be asked to undertake the valuation. In explaining our in-depth understanding of rule number 3, Candidates could reference that as an RICS member or regulated firm, we must be sure to understand a client's project-specific requirements before acting on their behalf. The client's scope of services should be agreed, along with any exclusions and timescales for achieving each of the deliverables before signing up to formal terms of engagement. In explaining our understanding of rule number 4, candidates can advise that the RICS expects its members to respect the rights of others and treat others with courtesy. We need to ensure that everyone is treated fairly and look to eliminate any instances of discrimination on the basis of disability, gender, pregnancy, race, religion, or sexual orientation. RICS members and firms also need to adopt a no-tolerance policy to bullying or harassment. In explaining our understanding of rule number 5, candidates can advise that members and firms are required to question practices and decisions that they suspect are not right and raise concerns with colleagues, senior management, clients, or the RICS. When making public statements, we need to ensure that these do not undermine public confidence in the profession. When receiving and processing complaints, we need to ensure that these are dealt with promptly, openly, and professionally. In complying with rule number 5, a useful sense check to ensure compliance is to ask ourselves if we would be comfortable in standing behind our actions if these were brought into the media or a public forum. We may also receive a question checking our understanding of the professional obligations of members. And to address this, firstly, we need to reference that members must comply with the CPD requirements set by the RICS, which requires 20 hours of CPD for each calendar year, 10 hours of which must be formal CPD. Secondly, that members must cooperate with the RICS. And thirdly, that members must promptly provide all information reasonably requested by the Standards and Regulation Board or those exercising delegated authority on its behalf. Candidates may also receive a question checking their understanding of the professional obligations of firms. And to address this, first of all, they must reference that firms must publish a complaints handling procedure, which includes an alternative dispute resolution provider approved by the RICS, and they must also maintain a complaints log. Number 2, that firms must ensure that all previous and current professional work is covered by adequate and appropriate professional indemnity cover. Number 3, that firms with a sole principal must make appropriate arrangements for their professional work to continue in the event of their incapacity, death, or absence or inability to work. Obligation number 4 is that firms must cooperate with the RICS. Obligation number 5, where firms must promptly provide all information reasonably requested by the Standards and Regulation Board. Rule number 6, that firms must display on their business literature, in accordance with RICS public policy on designations, and a designation to denote that they are regulated by the RICS. And finally, obligation number 7, where firms must report to the RICS any matter that they are required to report under the rules for the registration of firms.
Another question we may receive is please explain your understanding of the RICS Black Book document updates. And to address this, candidates can advise that the RICS Black Book documents provide best practice guidance and knowledge for quantity surveyors on complex areas such as acceleration, contract selection, cash flow forecasting, and cost analysis. The RICS is currently undertaking a review to update the Black Book content with the aim of producing a new edition with improved presentation and navigation. Several of the out-of-date publications have now been withdrawn due to contract legislation and case law changes. Please explain your understanding of domestic reverse charge. And to address this, candidates can advise that the domestic reverse charge was introduced in October 2020 and is a new approach for charging VAT on suppliers and subcontractors within the construction industry. Following the changes, main contractors will no longer make VAT payments to their supply chain and instead will now pay HMRC directly. This results in suppliers and subcontractors no longer receiving the 20% VAT value on invoices, which previously served as a short-term loan until the supplier paid VAT to HMRC. A follow-on question we may receive is what impact has the domestic reverse charge had on the construction industry? And to address this, candidates can advise that as a short-term effect, the reverse charge has resulted in a reduction in cash flow for suppliers and subcontractors. A longer-term effect may see prices within the construction industry increasing as suppliers will need to recover this shortfall or seek short-term borrowing arrangements at a direct cost to themselves.
We'll now move into the Q&A practice that is focused on the core competencies of the quantity surveying pathway, starting with design economics and cost planning. So the first question we'll take a look at is how would you advise a client who wanted to know what sources of cost information are available in order to compile a feasibility estimate. So this is an example of a level 3 question where we need to demonstrate reasoned advice and depth of knowledge. And to address this, we can say that previously, when advising clients on sources of cost information available, I would make them aware of sources such as internal benchmarking data, previous tender submissions, industry sources of cost information such as the Building Cost Information Service, SPONS and LAXTONS, and we can make references to sources of cost information within our assumptions and exclusions of any feasibility estimates that we've compiled and issued to our clients. The next question we'll take a look at is a level 2 question. Sorry, slight correction there. This is a level 2 question. So the assessors have said that we've mentioned within our submission documentation that we have worked in accordance with the RIBA plan of work. So this is a level 1 question, just testing our knowledge on the different work stages that are applicable under the RIBA work stages. So to answer this level 1 question, we would very concisely need to address this, and we would simply go through the different RIBA work stages, which are strategic definition, preparation and briefing, concept design, spatial coordination, technical design, manufacturing and construction, handover and use. A follow-on question that we may get on this is, what kind of cost advice did you provide to your client as the design progressed from RIBA work stage 1 through to work stage 4? So again, this is a level 3 question. So to address this, we will need to talk in the past tense in a reflective manner about how we have demonstrated helpful and useful advice to our clients. So to address this, we can say that at RIBA work stage 1, preparation and brief, the level of design detail available was restricted to the schedule of accommodation and high-level design aspirations. At this stage, I was able to prepare a cost per square metre estimate using internal benchmarking data and industry sources of cost information. And by using applicable rates and the gross internal floor area, I was able to provide the client with a high-level feasibility estimate. As the design progressed into RIBA work stage 2 to 4, concept design through to technical design, the project drawings and specifications became available, and I was able to use these to compile an elemental cost plan by taking off quantities from the project drawings. This provided the client with a much more accurate estimate, breaking down the building into cost headings from substructure, superstructure, services and professional fees. Another question we may get under design economics and cost planning is, what level of contingency did you recommend to the client? So again, this is another example of a level 3 question where we have given clients advice. So again, we need to be very careful of using reflective terminology and talking in the past tense. And to address this, we can say that with input from the design team, I was able to jointly produce a risk register identifying each of the project risks. Each risk was assigned a probability and impact profile, and my duty was to advise the team on the cost allocation for each of the associated risk items. By pricing the risk register and assigning probability and impact profiles, the contingency allowance for the scheme was calculated and updated as the scheme progressed. We may also get a question asking, what is an order of cost estimate? So this is an example of a level 1 question where we need to be very concise and very focused on answering the question only. No references to practical experience are needed for this. It's just simply a case of giving a very concise answer. And to address this, we can say that an order of cost estimate is the determination of possible cost of a building early in the design stage in relation with the employer's fundamental requirements. It forms a basis of the cost planning process. How would you advise a client to proceed if the cost plan exceeds the budget? So again, another example of a level 3 question. And to address this, we can say that I would advise a client to assess the costs and ensure the sources of the increase, to identify the source of the increase and whether any element of work is abnormally high against the initial order of cost estimate. We would then propose value engineering to the client and the design team to try and bring the forecast cost back in line with the original order of cost estimate. We may also get a question asking what is meant by the term buildability. So an example of the level 1 question, again where we need to be very concise in our answer. To address this, we can simply say that buildability is harnessing the contractor's expertise and knowledge during the design stage. The contractor will use their experience and expertise to advise on the methodology of construction that is being proposed and discuss the pros and cons associated. They may be able to propose more efficient and more cost-effective methods of construction. We may also get a question asking what is a functional unit. So another level 1 question where we'll be very concise in our response. A functional unit means a unit of measurement used to represent the prime use of the building or part of a building. For example, the functional unit in pricing a hotel would be a cost per bedroom. When pricing a hospital, it may be a cost per bed. The functional unit in retail space is the square meterage of net retail space. It also includes associated circulation space. What are the advantages of buildability? So another level 1 question. So the advantages that we can reference are better programming, sequencing and construction methods. For example, a quicker construction time, lower capital and lifecycle costs, improved quality in the finished building performance and maintenance characteristics. We may also get a question asking what items have you typically excluded when producing feasibility cost estimates? And to address this question, we can say that we have previously excluded professional fees, VAT, client decant costs, loose fixture and fittings, inflation, site acquisition costs, section 106s, removal of asbestos. We may also then get a follow-on question to this asking why VAT is normally excluded. So another example of a level 1 question. And this is because different clients will incur different levels of VAT and VAT may, for instance, not be applicable. Normally, we're not in a position to know the correct rate of VAT unless we're informed of it, and that's why typically VAT is excluded. We'll now move on to the construction technology competency. The first question we'll take a look at is what are the different types of piles foundations? So another example of a level 1 question where we'll give a very concise response. The different methods that we can reference are sheet piles, secant piles, board piles, and precast piles. We may get a follow-on question to this asking, how do CFA board piles work? So another example of a level 1 question where we'll be very concise in our response. And to address this, we can say that CFA piles are constructed by rotating a hollow stem continuous flight auger into the soil. This will bore out the subsoils to a design depth. Concrete or grout is then pumped through the hollow stem, maintaining static head pressure. This fills the cylindrical cavity created as the auger is then slowly removed. What advice would you give a client who is wanting to know the technical disadvantages of a steel frame construction? So this is an example of a level 3 question requiring us to demonstrate our helpful and practical advice that we'd give to the client in question. And to address this, we can say that we would make the client aware of the disadvantages of steel frames, and these being that the steel frame would require fire protection. Certain parts of the steel frame may need replacing. The price of steel is also variable, which creates added cost uncertainty prior to the scheme being undertaken. Steel frames normally require very experienced and specialist builders, and as a result of this, the resources to achieve a steel frame may be harder to procure or harder to resource than other forms of construction. We may then also get a follow-on question asking us, what different forms of fire protection are you aware of that can be used on steel frames? So another example of a level 1 question. And to address this, we can say, I'm aware of intumescent paint, fire protective boarding, spray applied fire resistive material, we may then get another follow-on question to this, saying that you mentioned intumescent paint. How does this work? Again, another example of a level 1 knowledge and understanding question. And to address this, we can say that intumescent coating is applied like a paint type material, which is inert at low temperatures. The coating reacts with heat, and as the temperature rises during a fire event, the intumescent coating swells and forms a char layer that covers the steel. This stops oxygen getting to the surface of the steel and prevents it from burning. We'll now move on to the contract practice competency. So the first question we'll take a look at is, what 8 conditions need to be met for a contract to be in place? So another example of a level 1 knowledge and understanding question. So again, to this, we need to focus on giving a really concise response where no real reference to practical experience is needed. And to address this, we can just simply refer to the 8 conditions. So this is the offer of one party, the acceptance by the other, consideration, so for example money, services or goods that are being exchanged between those parties, the intention to form a contract, so both parties involved need to have the intention of entering into the contract. The contract also needs to be fully legal. Both parties must have capacity to make the agreement, so this excludes minors. Consent must also be in place as well, so there must be no force or influence on vulnerable persons. Both parties must also have the possibility of performance, so they must be capable of performing their obligations under the contract. Another question we'll take a look at is, can you tell me what elements you have included within a valuation from one of the projects that you have worked on? So this is an example of a level 2 question where we need to be more careful now around making real references to our practical experience and trying to talk here in the past tense. So to address this, we can say that during the projects I've worked on, the valuations I carried out typically included items such as preliminaries, the measured works, variation items, materials on site, materials off site, and any loss and expense claims, and finally retention. How would you advise your clients on using standard versus bespoke forms of contract? So this is an example of a level 3 question of the reasoned and helpful advice that we would give to a client. And to address this, we can say that this would depend on the client's objectives. I would make them aware of the implications of both options and advise accordingly. For example, standard forms are written by legal experts. Rights and obligations of each party are clearly set out to the required level of detail. Risks should have been allocated appropriately between the parties within standard forms. And parties should be familiar with the provision within these forms, so there's greater consistency in application and fewer unforeseen anomalies. The time and expense of preparing a fresh document for each project is avoided, and case law is built up over time, providing good sources of knowledge and clarity of the terms. The next question we'll take a look at is what must be in place before liquidated damages can be deducted. So another example of a level 1 knowledge-based question where we can give a very concise answer. And to this we can simply say that a non-completion certificate and a pay less notice must both be in place before LDs can be deducted. Another example of a level 1 question is what happens when time is at large. And again, to address this, we can give a very concise response. And obviously when time is at large, we can simply say that there is no set completion date and the contractor only has the obligation to complete the works in a reasonable time. When time is at large, liquidated damages cannot be claimed as there is no date to take them from. We could also say that the employer would have to try and prove that the contractor had not completed the project in a reasonable amount of time. The next question we'll take a look at is, you mentioned within your summary of experience that you have valued materials off-site. How did you value these? So this is an example again of a level 2 question where we must talk in the past tense and give practical experience or examples of practical experience that we have personally gained. So to address this, we can say that when valuing materials off-site during the project, I obtained proof that ownership will transfer to the employer upon payment, for example a vesting certificate. I ensured that insurance provisions were in place until the materials arrived at site, that the materials are clearly labelled for the site and set apart from other materials when they were in their off-site location. You could all mention a materials off-site bond being provided if this was required under the terms of the contract. That brings us towards the end of this Q&A practice. I really hope you found that useful. Please be sure to subscribe to the channel for ongoing APC support, and best of luck with your APC preparation.